Good morning. Today we're going to look at a 179cc Homelite pressure washer. It's been sitting for a couple years. Owner says it won't start. Let's go check it out. The common problems with these units are that the gasoline gets old, clogs up the carburetor, and fuel doesn't get to the places where it's supposed to go. In this scenario, there's plenty of compression, lots of compression. The spark and the plug are good, and that leads us to the fuel system. This unit, of course, has a fuel tank up near the top, a line that goes underneath into the fuel system, back of the carburetor, and of course the on and off fuel switch and the on and off run switch. The scenario here is it's very difficult without taking everything apart to see if there is actually fuel flowing. So what we do is go straight to the bowl and see if there's fuel flow. At the base of the carburetor, inside behind the on and off switches, is the bowl. On the bottom of the bowl is a nut that comes in from the bottom and holds the bowl on. On the side of the bowl is the drain plug. We're going to turn the fuel on, open the drain plug, and see if the fuel flows freely. At this point, we're just going to remove this side bolt using a 10 millimeter and see if any fuel comes pouring out, dripping out, is dirty, whatever it looks like, we'll go from there. Okay, that takes care of the bolt and nothing's coming out. Now I'm going to open the fuel tank supply and we'll see if anything comes out. Okay, the fuel petcock is open. Fuel directly from the tank goes to the control switch and nothing is coming out the bowl. Minor drip, if you can see it. Very slow fuel supply. And that means that the float inside and potentially the needle valve and the bottom of the bowl probably have varnished up gasoline, needs to be removed and cleaned. I'm shutting off the fuel switch now. 1 or 2 drips is not enough. It should flow freely. So you know you have to get into the carburetor, bottom at least, to do the cleaning. These units are tightly packed within the frame of the pressure washer itself. So we've got to start taking off the air cleaner cover, the air cleaner, and see if there's enough room to move this plastic cover off and out to get the carburetor out. And that's what we'll do now. This snaps up with a little lip here, and off it comes. Air cleaner sponge, and that'll give us enough room to move around. Now we're going to try these bolts right here and see if the carburetor will come off without moving the engine. I'll use my little Black & Decker assistant to speed things up. And a 10 millimeter wrench from this side, because nothing else will get in there because of the frame. Okay, and this mechanism may have to remove this top part, but we'll see if it comes off and there's any room for clearance to get out of here. Disconnect this vent hose. It goes to the valve cover and it just pulls out. Now we have enough room for clearance here. We'll see if it'll come out. And it doesn't. With this machine, the frame is too close to remove the carburetor and intake plastics to get at the carburetor. So I had to remove 3 of the bolts underneath and loosen one of them so that this engine can pivot out of the way. There's plenty of room to pivot it and get at this right here. These are the bolts, there's 4 of them. And they're quite tight. And then we're going to pivot this so that I can get at the parts I need to remove. And that should be good. Next, we'll try and remove this plastic off of the carburetor mount. There should be nothing attached to it other than the carburetor bolts. Okay, there we go. And there's an air vent going to the tank. And this can just be taken out of the way and set aside. And this is where we're trying to get to. And we've got the fuel line coming down behind and 2 rods, a spring and a rod, and the spark plug wire is attached to this part right here, and it should come clear when the carb comes off. And with the air cleaner cover off, this should come right off. There's a plate gasket, metal plate with a rubber coating. And then this should come out enough to get this fuel line off. And the fuel line clip is right back here. And as there's no fuel, it's turned off to this point, the valve. So there'll be fuel prior to it. So you want to make sure that no fuel is going to drip out. Check the suppleness of the hose.
With the fuel line pinched off
and
near
put
the
a clip
top,
or a
closest
clamp
to the
on
tank.
it to stop the fuel from flowing.
The fuel line here is pulled off of this tube, which can be a little annoying if it's really stuck. And then the carburetor is ready to come off. And carefully remove these springs, and this turns all the way so that this will lift and come right out. And the other one is done very carefully so you don't bend or stretch the spring. And there we go. That is how to get the carb off. And then I just twist the engine and whatever it takes to get the carburetor off in your hand.
With this engine and frame combination, I had to remove the 4th bolt because pivoting because of the muffler housing wasn't going to work. It was hitting. So I did them all, and we just moved the engine in a position where the carburetor will come off and we can look at it. And there's the carburetor. And we know that it's plugged somewhere down under the fuel supply system after the valve. So likely in the bowl, the float, and the needle. So the next to come off is the bottom bowl with that nut from the bottom right there. Using the 10mm wrench, we're going to loosen the bowl. And we see some fuel starting to come out. And I can tell this bowl's never been off, so we will remove it with a 10mm. See what's inside. Bottom of the screw is tinted a color. Looks like oxidation, corrosion. We open this up, and inside here we see that it's not shiny anymore. And it feels rough, and it's been corroding with the fuel and possibly water. Now we go and we check our float, and our float does not move properly. This should come down enough to let fuel in, and it's sticky, and we'll clean it, remove it, and clean the main jet up the middle.
And if you're removing this main jet, be very careful. It's light brass. You can strip it. Basically, the carburetor would be useless then. This carburetor, the float moves a little bit, but the needle in here will not move at all. So it is seized and frozen with gunk or corrosion. And that'll have to be cleaned up, so I'll be gently pulling this out and then checking the fuel delivery system to that needle valve. And this is probably the problem. If you can see that, that should be a shiny, smooth little needle, and the gunk and corrosion and dried gas right there makes this needle valve not work. So it all has to be cleaned up with carb cleaner, being careful not to spray any rubber parts with carb cleaner. I'll clean this up and we'll see what it looks like. Now, with the carburetor cleaned, this unit, the float and needle assembly, the needle here and the float here should move together. And then when you're done and ready to go, using a tube or cleaning this and using your lip, make sure that the fuel passage is open, and then double check it by closing it and see that it stops. And once that occurs, if that goes clearly through here and you can stop it by gently moving the float, then it's ready to go back together. To put it back together, the needle float assembly are held on by this small rod. Then the bowl will go back on the bottom after you've cleaned it the best you can, and you'll make sure that the side hole faces the part of the engine where you can get at it near the frame. And then tighten it all down and it's ready to reinstall.
Now with the components put back on exactly the way you took them off, fuel line hooked up, fuel line open, remove this bolt into a drip cup and see if there is a steady light flow of gasoline. Then if there is, put this bolt back in, snug it up, reset the bolts on the engine to hold it into the frame, and you're ready to try it.
Now with the parts back together, supposedly good fuel, the carburetor cleaned, and the fuel on, it's time to try it. Power on. Good carburetor, good gas, should run. Good luck with your projects.